Well, welcome everybody, and good morning, and welcome to the Slim Nation 101's podcast. I'm Slim Overton, of course, and I'm glad you joined us this morning and have a special guest here with me this morning. And I like to talk to authors and get to know them and dig into what makes them tick. But we have Billy Montgomery-Cook here. Good morning, Billy. How are you?
Good morning, Jim. Or should I say Slim?
Slim or whatever's comfortable for you. You can use Slim. That's fine.
Morning.
Uh,
And thanks so much
but
for the invitation to come. Thank
yeah, well, thank you for agreeing to appear. I really appreciate that. So, well, you live here in Hampton Roads now. Are you in Portsmouth?
I'm in Portsmouth, born and primarily raised in Portsmouth.
Yes,
I had a
but
military father,
but
so
you,
we moved around some, but we ended up coming back to Portsmouth. And then my husband and I ended up coming back to Portsmouth as well. So yeah, born and
yeah,
raised.
and came back and just didn't come back and say, well, I'm gonna sit down and enjoy myself. Came back and got involved with the different community efforts. I've seen you at different groups, talking about the communities or what we need to do in certain areas to improve, especially with our youth. And one thing, you are a history buff. Well, let me talk about this. You came back, and one of the things I probably growing up, being a part of a military family, you had the opportunity to travel a lot, like many military families.
Mhm.
Tell us a little bit about that and how that kind of shaped and you know, uh, who you are now. Because sometimes when you have those opportunities to go different places, you experience different, you have different experiences, and especially during the times probably when you were growing up, things, well, more in the South, they talk about the Jim Crow laws and things like that. But I think you went, some of your experiences were up in the North where people thought Jim escaped Jim Crow, but it was a little different there as well. But talk a little bit about your experiences there, having to go to high school and get adjusted to different students around you and in the neighborhoods.
Well, as I said, my father was in the Coast Guard. He originally started in the Navy, where he met my mom, and then he switched over to the Coast Guard. So when I was in the fourth grade, that was our first experience moving, and we moved to Baltimore for a year, where I tell everybody that's where we got my sister. My sister Nina, we picked her up in Baltimore and my parents, I used to tell her, Daddy and Mommy found you and they picked you up and brought you home. So our Baltimore, you are a Baltimore contribution. And then when I came back, I was here for fifth grade. And then my father was transferred to Cape May, New Jersey. So if you know anything about Cape May, after you leave Cape May, you hit the Atlantic Ocean because
Okay.
it's the very tip. So in my experiences in Cape May, we were there for 4 years, my sixth, seventh, eighth, and ninth grade years. So it was the very first time I went to school with white children.
Mm.
And first time I lived around white people because they weren't on our street, but they lived a few blocks over. So it was the very first time I encountered that whole integration piece, which being a kid felt normal to me. They're just white kids and
Mhm.
black kids. So, I had friends, white friends, and they were in my house. I was in their house, no problem. But when I was in the seventh grade, my first best friend was a white girl, an Italian girl by the name of Linda Parinella. And Linda and I wanted to visit each other, but our father was very resistant. But she would never tell me why. She just kept saying, no, I can't come, or no, you can't come to my house. And my brother Sam, who a lot of people knew, was the first black motorcycle
Right
police
here in the city of Portsmouth. Right.
in the city of Portsmouth. Sam
Mhm.
and I were dueling siblings. We used to fight all the time. And my mother and I used to have to separate us all the time because we were always fussing and fighting about something. But Sam was the one who educated me about integration and let me know. Linda Parinello's parents, her daddy said, no, because you're colored. You're colored, you're a Negro, you ain't never going to be able to go over there, which was hurtful. But over time, I was like, oh, this is what he's talking about. So when from Cape May, we went to Boston. We moved to Boston, and I was there for a year. And the schools were integrated. I went to an all-female high
Now,
school.
now tell what years these were. I think that's significant to know what years.
So this was the 60s.
Okay.
60s, because we came back here from Boston. My father retired, and we moved back here in 1967.
Mm-hmm.
So in 1967, my parents had bought a home in Mount Hermon, and we moved into the home, and the city was dealing with this whole integration business because I knew I would be going to Norcom.
Mm-hmm.
But because of the way they had it zoned, I ended up having to go to Wilson.
Yeah, it was almost like it was forced integration
It really,
during that period.
really
They
was.
tried the freedom of choice, where they gave the students an opportunity to choose where they wanted to go, and a
Mhm.
lot of black students did actually choose some of the white schools, but it wasn't in reverse. The whites didn't choose to come to Northam, so then they had to force the
Right,
integration.
right. So
Hmm.
we were forced, the way I was forced to go to Wilson. And what made it so hard for me was from where our house was on Bell Street, we could hear Norcom's band rehearsing.
Hmm.
So, we could hear the band rehearsing, we could hear the athletes out there yelling, the coaches yelling at each other and all that kind of stuff. And I couldn't understand, well, why can't I go to Norcom? And my parents kept saying, no, you got to go to Wilson. So I went to Wilson, in fact, graduated from Wilson.
Hmm.
So when I got there, Wilson had already made the initial steps into integration.
Hmm.
From what I understand, when I got there in 67, the first students came in 65.
Right.
And in 66, a few more came in 67. The numbers started growing. So, and by that time, they had started bringing in Black teachers because my homeroom teacher was Frances Page, who
Yeah.
used to be an English teacher at Norcom, her and her husband.
Of course, they brought in the cream of the crop.
Right, right. And I didn't realize that until I graduated from there 2 years later to understand that, when they started integrating the schools, started integrating the faculties, they kind of picked and chose. And they got the cream of the crop in terms of instructors to come.
Yep.
Yeah.
Billy, let me ask you this right quick before you move on. Now, comparing the schools in Boston as you came down here.
Mhm.
In Boston, you're up in the north, and down here, you're coming to Wilson, which is integration that just started maybe a couple of years earlier. Was it any difference in the acceptance of you in Wilson when the early integration and what took place probably was going on a lot longer
Right.
in Boston? Any difference in the acceptance, except for the parents, of course?
When the year we lived in Boston, I loved it and did not want to come back to Virginia. In fact, I was the one sitting on the stoop of the apartment building saying, I'm not going. Like,
Yeah,
hell no, I'm not going. I'm not going back.
because
Because,
you probably were just picking up that Kennedy Boston dialect. As soon as you were getting that, you had to come, and then you can come down to the south with that Boston accent.
That Boston accent and those Boston ways.
They're Boston ways, yes.
Yeah,
Anyway, I just wanted to know, what was it wasn't any different because the students seemed like because I spent 1 year at Wilson before I went to Norcom, and the students seemed a little bit more accepting for the most part. It was some there that were uh, a little different. My problem was mainly with some of the older teachers there, you know. So that's why I wanted to see, what kind of
there was
difference.
a difference there. When I was in Boston, they had had school integration so long. For me to come in, I mean, this is just another Black girl because the school was fully integrated.
Right.
Was the difference was the fact that it was an all-female high school.
Oh, okay.
Few schools in Boston were like that. They had a girls' Latin school, which was like their I'd say it was a version of a college prep kind of school. They had a
Yeah.
girls' Latin, they had a boys' Latin, and
And
they
I
had
guess it was a big
work.
Catholic presence up there. So,
Right, right. So high school that I went to, since it was all girls, it was Jeremiah Burke High School for girls. And the staff was fully integrated. The big deal for that school was academically, they set a high bar because they were educating women. And it wasn't just Black women, Latino women. It was the very first time I went to school with Puerto Rican girls and Cuban girls. I mean, the school was truly integrated. And there was no difference. When I came back to Virginia, what I experienced at Wilson was
black and white.
right. There were the white kids and there were the Black kids. And
Nothing in between.
nothing in between. Very, very little. There was interaction, but not a whole lot. And during the year, I think it was my senior year, there was this, at Wilson, there was this walkout because Black kids were protesting the fact that there were no Black cheerleaders. The problem was they didn't tell me or my best friend Renee, they didn't tell us, and we were basically the Black rebel rousers. They didn't tell us that they were walking out. I just remember coming into the school, walking into Wilson and not seeing any Black kids, and going to class, not seeing any Black kids, which I thought was, wait a minute, something's going on. And out the window and seeing them all downstairs outside protesting that there were no Black cheerleaders. So Renee and I, we were upset. Why are you all down there protesting cheerleaders? We need you all protesting other things. But I think a couple of years later, they finally got Black cheerleaders. But that's what the Black kids rallied around.
Yeah, and I wanted you to go there because when you got to the next level, you went to Spelman and HBCU. They won't call HBCUs then, but they are now.
Right.
You went to a Black university, and again, all girls, but you were still in that section down there in Atlanta. You had Morehouse, and you had Spelman, and you had Clark Atlanta, all there in a quad like situation, and so that experience had to be a little different from you coming from the Boston schools where it was totally a mixture of different races, and then coming to Wilson where your neighborhood was Black, but your school was mostly white. Right. But then going to an HBCU where it was all these beautiful Black people.
I'm telling you.
A whole different experience. Talk briefly about that experience, and I'm leading up to this because your books and plays you have written, a lot of your early experiences. You probably can see it's a reflection in your writing today and things you do because you put all those experiences together. you know, and then and I think you talked about your introduction to your appreciation for history
Right.
once you got to those HBCUs. So talk briefly about that.
So when I went to Spelman, I'm before Spelman, when I was in high school, when I was a senior in high school, and I was looking at colleges, the guidance counselors at Wilson were white, and the only black schools they knew about was Norfolk State and Hampton.
Hmm.
I was like, nope, don't want to go to Norfolk State, too close. And my mother and brother Sam had gone to Norfolk State, and
Hmm.
my oldest brother Dennis had gone to Hampton. And while Dennis was at Hampton, he was a student government president. And my father said he raised so much hell there. He graduated, and he graduated from Hampton, I think in, it must have been 69,
Hmm.
68, 69, something like that. But my father said he raised so much hell there. They were glad that he graduated. I remember meeting Dr. Holloway, who was president of Hampton. And in meeting him, because one year, I think my brother's senior year, my parents were named Parents of the Year. So in meeting Dr. Holloway, it was either Holloway or Holiday, but in meeting him, the very first question he asked me was, do you intend to come to Hampton? And I said, oh no, I don't want to come to Hampton. He was, and you could hear this relief, the sigh of
Oh,
relief.
he thought he was getting another Montgomery.
From Montgomery. So I assured him, nope, I don't want to do that. But when I went to Spelman, the major reason why I wanted to go to Spelman was because it was all female. The experience of going to an all female high school in Boston just pressed that on me. It's a different kind of atmosphere.
So what was it? I mean, what was it about that? It was more conducive to learning for you
Very,
because.
it's very freeing, it's very liberating, but it's an opportunity to be around all of these really smart black women. So
Hmm.
you are just, you're sitting there and you're like, well, what am I doing here? Because I mean, these girls want, they want to be doctors and engineers and psychiatrists, and I mean, and they're artists, and you're sitting there like, so how did I get in here with all these smart, really, really very intelligent, very articulate black women? And the school set such a bar. At the time, Dr. Manley used to tell us, if you want to pledge something, pledge getting out of Spelman, because we didn't have sororities on campus. But they place such a high bar that, and you're surrounded by all these women who are meeting that bar, that you got to excel. Otherwise, you don't last.
Yeah,
And
let me point this out to somebody that might watching now, watch later, that's thinking about going to college and saying, all girls college, and what about what about I might want to uh,
all those girls,
socially, but
all
the
those
way it's situated there socially, you
girls
still have those men, the Morehouse men, which is all men
right
college.
across the
So
street.
it's no shortage of social
Oh no,
mingling, I might say.
oh no, because over the years, young girls have asked me, "Well, how do you do that? I mean, how do you date? Aren't there any guys around?" I was like, "Apparently, you've never heard of Morehouse College.
Yeah, yeah.
Right across the street, Clark,
Nothing but men.
nothing but males. And those guys take classes with us, and we took classes at Morehouse. We also
Right.
took classes at Clark. So it's now, what used to be Clark College is now Clark Atlanta U,
Yeah.
and you take classes there. And when I was there, you had Morris Brown, which was
Marsh Brown.
the street, up the hill, and round the corner. So you could also take classes at Morris Brown. You were free to take classes anywhere in the AU Center. So you saw, I mean, you met Black guys everywhere. And
Mhm.
and 9 times out of 10, you were dealing with very bright, very articulate, very bright Black people. You are in this center filled with young, creative Black minds with faculty feeding into that. So yeah, it's an experience like no other. And you really don't, I don't think we really get an appreciation for it until we graduate and look back on that.
Right.
So this year was my 50th class reunion. And I went back, and it was one of the discussions that we had, being in that environment with all these bright, articulate Black people. Samuel Jackson came out of that environment. His wife, his wife went to Spelman. She was a year ahead of me. Latanya was there, and we used to see Sam walking down the lane headed to Abbey Hall to talk to Latanya, and we knew when they had a falling out because she would be cussing at him as he was coming, and he would be saying, "Baby, don't be like that. Baby, don't be like that. I can explain." And you can hear them. We used to sit on the steps of Morehouse Hall. Abbey Hall was right next to us my freshman year. And I remember him walking back and forth and Latanya cussing him out. Them, "Baby, don't be like that." And now we see where both of them are.
Yeah.
Spike Lee came in after me. I believe Spike came in because I graduated in 73, but I believe he came in. My sister and I have this debate. But if memory serves me correctly, Spike Lee came into the dorm where I was an RA. I was a resident assistant in Packard Hall for 2 years.
Yeah.
And my senior year, if memory serves me correctly, I used to see him coming in there because he used to come in with Sam Nunn. Sam Nunn was from Atlanta, and he used to come in and visit with some of his homegirls from Atlanta. So that whole environment of creativity, of intellect, of, it's just something to behold.
Yeah,
Not
and I see you right.
behold the green and gold, but behold the Atlanta University Center. I
I
mean,
hear you. I hear you. And I see you graduated with a BA in history. And
yes,
it was like me when I went to Union. I thought I knew a little bit about history, but it's once you go to one of those Black colleges, you're exposed to so much more.
right.
And what impressed me was how I learned how much of a contribution we as Black folks had made to this country.
Oh,
And
very
on the high school level, the curriculum was kind of controlled. So
well.
we knew about the basics, George Washington Carver and things like that. And and of course at Norcom they taught us a lot of things outside of the book. But when I got to Union, a lot of those the Black history classes and even Black religion was required, regardless of what major you had. That's where Union was. That's why a lot of preachers come out of there. But they and I was just amazed that I didn't realize how much we had really contributed, and that was during the '70s when we were uh, per se discovering our Blackness.
True.
And you put that together with what we were learning in the classroom. So I guess that experience was similar with you there.
Yeah, it was. Um, I I discovered a love of history, but when I was at Spelman, I took a number of African history courses. So the black history for us tended to come later for me.
Hmm.
Um, but I remember taking um, a course in the history of South Africa, which was taught by an African. I had two I had two African instructors, which coming to Spelman, I never ever thought that would happen. But I had two, a Dr. Mahoney, who taught me a Women in Africa class. And that's when I learned how influential some of these mission programs were in Africa. And I had another African instructor, Dr. Gabriel Hewitt, and I had to take a history of South Africa class as a history major. In my junior year, I was able to go to Africa. I went to West Africa,
Wow.
Operation Crossroads, and I was there for a month in Nigeria, in Western State Nigeria, in a little village called Tede. And after we were at Tede we were there for a month, we traveled for the last 2 weeks of my stay there. And I was able to go to Cape Coast Castle and see the door of no return.
Wow. I mean, I hadn't been there, but I heard that's
You
an amazing
have
emotional
I mean,
visit.
Black people in this country, you have to go. If you got a bucket list and it does not include going to West Africa, especially, I went to Cape Coast. I had a cousin who went to a slave castle in Senegal. But my experience at Cape Coast, this was 1972, and you could still smell bodies. You could,
And I heard people say that Leah Dre Stitz has been there several times, and she said you can still the smell
it's still
of
there.
and you're talking years and years of people coming through there, you know.
Hundreds, centuries, and you can still smell it. So you leave there. My experience was, it was a very emotional experience for me, because I remember standing on the balcony. Cape Coast is a fortress. It was a Dutch fortress. And I remember standing on that balcony and looking down on the door of no return, where the ships would come and load the slaves in and go out. I remember standing on that balcony and looking out and just being overwhelmed over what our ancestors went through. They were not supposed to live. Slavery was designed in such a way that Black people were not supposed to make it out of it. We were
Billy, and you mentioned earlier you got the American Black history later, and it probably was better that you went that route, because by the time you got to the American Black history, you were not surprised at how resilient we were, knowing from which we came.
That's right.
You know,
That's right.
it was no wonder once we got here, even under slavery,
Under
that
that,
we excelled and survived.
right.
Something that most people wouldn't have.
After learning what we went through during that middle passage,
Mm-hmm.
just the middle passage, and then for our ancestors to get here and live and thrive. I mean, it just blows your mind when you understand we were not supposed to make it out of slavery. We were supposed to die. We were supposed to be animals, and we were supposed to die under the impact of labor. And for us to not only make it, we are still here, and we have children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, our future. No, it blows your mind. It blows your
Yeah,
mind.
and you said we're still here in the present time, and we're still having to survive some things.
Exactly.
As you think about, the recent, all the recent injustices that have been done to,
Okay.
young Black men and things like that. So if not for all that,
And that's
we probably would be extinct, because
and for our young people to understand that the 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 racial injustice, the social injustice, that's not new. That's not new. That's just becomes another layer of our history because our families went through, our parents went through some of that. I have an uncle. There was an uncle on my father's side that I understand was lynched as a teenager. So I mean that stuff it's in our families,
Yeah.
family trees. So for the sad part, I think that the part that has our ancestors rolling over in their graves for what they have gone through and endured is to see so many of our young people, our young Black males shooting each other.
Yeah.
That is just, I mean, they must be, you talk about the cemeteries rising.
Yeah. It's in our DNA to survive,
It's
but
enough.
how can we continue to survive if we've taken each other out? You know, I
Exactly.
mean,
That,
nobody can survive a bullet,
that is opposite.
position in the right place. Well,
That is,
Billy, let's go on. Yeah, and you went on to Bowling Green State University and got a MA in student personnel, which brought you end up coming to uh, uh, being administrator at ODU.
right.
Uh,
I was an advisor. First, I went to ODU twice. The first
okay.
years I went, I came in as an advisor to upper class students, sophomores through seniors in the College of Business and Public Administration. And I was an advisor in the advising center. I was there 5 years, and they shut the advising center down and decided that all the advising should be done by faculty. By 2007, when we left, we said to each other, we'll see how long that lasts.
Mm-hmm.
By 2007, I went back as an advisor to freshmen. First, for a couple of months, I was in the College of Science, and then they switched me over back to the College of Business. So I advised freshmen from 2007 to 2015 when I retired.
Yeah, because it's a lot to that, and I guess you said they figured that out, because you can't just be an advisor and just, each student is different, as far as the advice you have to give them, and you have to know that student, you have to know what's out there for them and know, in order to give them the correct advice, you can't just, it's not like a cookie cut thing where you give everybody the same advice and say that this works. So I'm glad they realized that.
But especially when you have students who have parents who are saying, you must major in this, you must major in that, you must be this, you must be that.
But that might not have fit that particular student's.
It really doesn't. So one of the things that as an advisor, as a freshman advisor, I used to have, we would have these previews in that freshmen would come in a few weeks early, and we would have these presentations to freshmen and their parents. And I used to tell parents that one of the things that you must understand is God has a plan for each one of us, including your children. And I would encourage you to encourage your student to listen to what that plan is, because that plan may be very different than what they're coming in or what you're telling them. So there is a plan. There's a definite plan for this child. But the $64,000 question is, what is that plan? And because one of the things that used to happen from time to time, I would get kids in business who really wanted to go into education. They had a heart for education. But their parents were saying, you can't make any money being a teacher. You need to be an accountant, or you need to go into IT, or you need to go into some business area because you can't make any money being a teacher, and you're not being respected. So some of our teacher shortages started in the 70s with kids being told, nope, can't make any money. You don't get respect. So don't do that. Go into business. And I would have students who would say, Ms. Cook, I hate accounting. I hate accounting. It doesn't agree with me. I want to be a teacher. But my parents are saying, I got to major in accounting. I got to major in business. I got to major in that. And it was difficult. It was difficult for a lot
And
of
and sometimes that set them up for failure. But now I want to say, you had to be an avid reader, because anybody majoring in history has to, it's a lot of reading involved, and you have to really
lot of
appreciate that. And I think that's probably where your creativity came from, or when did that start? Because we want to get into, the several books that you have written, and you said you had written plays and everything like that. And I noticed that people that are readers and things like that, and your experiences of traveling around with his father being in the military, you know, gave you a lot of different experiences, and then that creativity comes in, and you can't just hold it in. You have to put it in some kind of form, either in by your memoir or whatever. You have to put it in some kind of form. You have to express it in some kind of way. And I notice you also are a speaker. You go around, different venues or different places and make speeches. So when did that creativity start? Did that start early on, or did it come after your experiences of traveling around and then going to that HBCU at Spelman? When did that start? But I found out that it usually starts a little earlier. In
It actually started earlier than I realized, because
right.
you're right. As a history major, um, I used to have a teacher. I used to have a professor that said, used to tell us, I'm going to make a history junkie, a research junkie out of you. And I didn't understand what that meant until I had to start doing all these research papers. So history majors, you read a lot, you write a lot. And I just, I had an assignment. I had to do research papers, so I did. And I ended up, writing came very easy to me. And I used to end up helping other people with their term papers and that kind of thing. So the history I fell in love with, just, that research junkie part of me. I just didn't know what to do with it. So when I got married in 1980, I married a minister who plucked me from Portsmouth and landed me in Newark, New Jersey. So
Well, they're traveling again. Yeah.
he's pastored a church in East Orange, New Jersey for about, I think he was there about 6 years, 6 or 7 years before we left. But anyway, when we went to um, Calvary, the church, we wanted to do something different. So Keith had done some acting when he was in college, and I never did any acting, but I was always interested in theater. So we decided, why don't we start a theater group? So I told him, I said, okay, I'm not doing anything. Let me start. So I started looking at plays that we could do in church, and I didn't like any of them. And I kept saying, I think I can do better than that. So I started writing them. And one of the members of our church did a lot of off-Broadway work. So he became our director. So we
Mhm.
started this theater ensemble, and we started taking it around the churches. And it was just for fun, just something different. And, again, every year I would write a play. So when we moved back here, um, he he first pastored a church in Norfolk, which shall remain nameless, but he pastored a church in Norfolk, and they were not receptive to that at all. It was too radical, too strange, nothing. So I did one play there, and that was it. And then after Keith resigned from that church, he went to work for Norfolk Sheriff's Department, where he retired. And it's at that point that I really started looking at that whole thing of writing. We had our oldest child was a daughter, Janina, and Janina was coming home. She was in
Hmm.
middle school. She was coming home with all these stories about who was pregnant, who is getting an abortion. And I'm like, this is middle school, middle school. So I started writing her a letter. And the letter, it contained those things that I wanted her to know as a young Black woman, growing in Christ. And the letter just kept getting longer and longer and longer. And I started it when she was in middle school, gave it to her for her 16th birthday, printed it out, put it in a box, put a pink bow on it, and gave it to her. She was less than impressed. She wanted a car. She did not want a so I was, I was heartbroken, all this stuff, but it was for her. And then a few months later, I heard her reading portions of it to friends of hers. And that was my first inkling that, maybe this could be a book. And I started exploring that. My husband, Keith, told me to come home. By that time, I was working at TCC, teaching orientation classes and tutoring. Keith said, come home and write this book. I thought he was crazy, but I did. Put it together, sent it to Judson. It's the real deal. A
It's the
spiritual
real deal.
book. It's that one. That was the very first book. The Real Deal, a spiritual guide for Black teen girls. I had gone over the years, I had gone to a few writers' conferences, but never did anything with it. But came home, started writing it, decided, okay, if I'm going to do it, I got to go all the way because he told me to come home. So put it together, sent it off to Judson. I got a call from them about a month and a half later from their chief editor, Randy Frame. Randy says, Billie, we love it. We love the book. We just love it. Yes, we want to publish it, but we need you to rewrite it. So I'm like, well, if you love it and you want to publish it, why do I have to rewrite it? And he says, because you wrote it to your daughter. You got a lot of personal stuff in there. Who she looks like, her Aunt Vic. You got your hips from Aunt Vic. You got your nose from your. Don't nobody care about that. Everybody got an Aunt Vic. Everybody got an aunt that they got their nose from. I need you to rewrite it to the universal daughter. And you got a month to do it. And it was the same year of Hurricane Isabel. It was the same year, 2004. Hurricane Isabel hit. We had no power at our house for a month. But my mother had power in Chesapeake. And we kind of moved into my mother's house. I rewrote it, sent it off, to Judson. And they published it. I guess I heard from them for maybe about 6 months later. And I got these copies of the book. Since it was traditionally published, let me say this, since Judson, J-U-D, as in David, S-O-N, Judson Press, published it, and it was traditionally published, I had no say-so over the cover. So I didn't know what that book was going to look like until they sent it.
So were you pleased with
I was very pleased with it. And one of the reasons why I was pleased with it, a lot of people, when they saw the book, they thought it was a picture of my daughter, Janina, because Janina used to always wear her hair in a ponytail, like thousands, millions of other Black girls. And I later learned that cover was one of the first covers that showed a Black girl by herself. Up to that point, Black girls were always a part of a group. They were always, if they were featured in a book, they were always the white girl's best friend or another girl's cousin or something like that. They did not put covers of single Black girls on books until that book.
And what year was that published?
It came out in 2004.
Okay, so up to that point, that was a first.
Up to that point, from what I understand, that was the first. A single single Black girl with a ponytail just by herself looking up. So I was, when I learned that, I was over the moon. And Judson says they believe that's one of the reasons why the book became a national bestseller. To see that chocolate Black face on there, that is a Black girl.
Wow. So that led to the next book, which
came out
quite interesting because it's fiction, but it involves experiences here in Portsmouth, in the city of Portsmouth, Virginia.
The next book, by that time, when I moved back in 1989 from New Jersey, I joined Third Baptist, and there was a guy there, Linwood Williams. Had a theater group, and he was always doing plays. And when I was living in New Jersey, Keith, I'm going back now. When I first went to Jersey, Keith was working as an assistant to the pastor and youth minister at Bethany Baptist Church in Newark, which is one of the oldest Black churches in New Jersey.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things they did, they were a very different church. They used to bring in a lot of artists. And one thing they did, they brought in I.C. Davis and Ruby Dee. And the two of them had this show where they would read things. They had this reader's theater thing.
Mm-hmm.
Would read things, letters. They would read slave narratives. They would read poetry. And I attended their performance, and I left there changed. And I said, if I ever get the opportunity to do something like that, I'm going to do it. So when I moved back here to Jersey and started working with Linwood and understood what Linwood was doing, I told him I want to do something different. I know you write all your plays and stuff, but I want to look at Black history and culture. So I started a theater group in probably in 1990. We call ourselves the Not Just for February Players. And okay, Keith, I'll be with you shortly. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
So the group, it's four of us, the Not Just for February Players, and we specialize we are readers theater. So we read, and we read Black poetry, Black prose, we read slave narratives, we read spirituals, we read gospel. It's all read. Everything is read. And the group is, we're over 20 years old. We go to festivals, history, Chesapeake Poetry Festival used to have us every year. We've gone to churches, colleges, universities. We've gone to ODU a couple of times. Since COVID, we haven't been quite as active. So I'm trying to get that back up and running. Trinity Episcopal Church in downtown Portsmouth, the oldest church in Portsmouth, in the city of Portsmouth. They have taken us on as artists in residence for them. So we've done, I've written a couple of plays related to the Episcopal Church.
Put the book up. I think
this one in 2007. This is Georgiana Scott, a free child of Portsmouth. And basically, in doing research for my theater group, I stumbled on all this history of Portsmouth. So the Court Street Library there, Oh, wow, we can go in out. The Court Street Library, their local history room, used to have all these file cabinets and boxes full of Portsmouth history. It wasn't organized the way it is now. And they used to let me go in there. And I would just make copies of stuff, make notes of all this Portsmouth history. So it culminated in 3 plays, and it's supposed to be a trilogy of books. This is the first one, and it's also sold in the Visitor Center, downtown Portsmouth.
Okay.
Georgiana Scott was born in Portsmouth, and her family, her mother and her siblings, her mother's name was Mary Scott, and they are in the 1850 census of free blacks, free colored, whites and free colored. That's what it is. 1850 census. And the census is down in the library. And I saw her name and these siblings. And going into the history, the book is about, basically, she is the main character. And I took poetic license by changing some of the names of her family members in this book. But history, I learned through history that her family was a member of Monumental Methodist Church. And a lot of us wonder why we were Methodists. How did so many Black people get to be Methodists? One of the doctrines of the Methodist Church was that you are not to own slaves. And it's one of the reasons why the North and the South Methodist Church split. But the second thing was, if you own slaves, they had to be educated. And Monumental had a Sabbath school where Georgiana was first educated. So some of that is in here. There is some history about the shipyards. That's in here. I did 3 plays. The first play was called From the Beginning, and that was the beginnings from Portsmouth's founding to the Civil War. And the second play was called Red Blood, Cold Ground. That's Portsmouth Blacks in the Civil War. And the third play is called Colored Notes, an Evening with Jeffrey Wilson. And we've done both plays a bunch of times. Then
I hope you get a chance to bring some of that back, those readings and things like that. I think it's very important to expose not only our young folks, but it's a lot of adults that need to know that history. You know, a lot of times, the more history you know, and it instills a sense of pride.
It does. It really does.
In you, and probably motivates people to do more than what they might normally do. So, but we're coming down to an hour, so I wanted to show the other 2 books, and we'll probably do a part 2 where we can talk more in depth about your books. I just wanted to start this out so people would know who you are. A lot of people already know who you are, but those who don't know who you are, that's why we started out with your experiences in high school and coming here back home and going to Woodrow Wilson, doing the beginning of their integration, and then having the opportunity to go to an HBCU and experience that, which was a whole different experience for you. But we have Rise Up and Pray.
That's the latest. This
is the latest one, okay. And then we have the Sisters.
Scripture.
Right.
Sisters of Scripture, Mentors in Womanhood.
So we have those 4 books, and we'll come back and talk a little bit about that. But before we go off, how can people purchase these books? And as if you they want to contact you about reading different church groups or whatever groups about bringing back those readings. I think people, that's an art that people need to be, just being able to sit down and just listen to, the histories. I think when I was in school in the 70s, that was very big. It
Right.
was before rapping came out, but it was more like we had a area on campus where we would go there called the cafe, where
Uh-huh.
people would come there, and with students that didn't come there for writing because we didn't have that major, but they were creative, and it gave them a chance to come down there on Friday night sometime and just read some of the things that they had written down, some of the things they had experienced.
Right.
And of course, it was set to music, bongos, and things like that. That was that atmosphere of the 70s.
Right.
But that was something that it gave us a chance to really explore our minds and use what we have up here, you
Right.
know, to the
Right.
fullest, because most people don't use half their brain.
Well, let me say this. Let me say this. One one of the things that happened, um, Leah Stith, who was on your other show,
Yes,
Leah has a group of young people.
yes,
A couple of years ago, this was before COVID, a couple of years pre-COVID, her group, members of her group, did did my play, in before the beginning, and we did it at Trinity. So these were kids, these were teenagers reading this history, and you could just see how it changed them in many ways, because during the rehearsals they would say things like, "I didn't know that.
hmm
I didn't
hmm
know that went on at Portsmouth. I didn't know that. I didn't know that." So yeah, you're right. That
yeah,
hit.
and especially now with certain factions trying to ban certain books, and the books that they are putting on their list to ban is ridiculous. And so we have to make sure we counter that with activities like this, and not everybody is a reader. Sometimes
That's,
can sit down and read. So sometimes being able to have that spoken word, which we used to call it, or readings like you would have,
right.
gives the people the opportunity to sit down there and just listen and take it all in.
That's
And
true.
and once it's taken in, our brains are like computers. It's there.
Got it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how would they contact you if they want to, have readings in their churches, or I don't know how well that would work in the school system, but
Okay. So my contact information, as far as the books are concerned, the Georgiana Scott book is down in the visitor center,
yeah, that's the only one I don't have.
unless they sold out.
Yeah.
Real Deal, books 2 and 3 and 4, The Real Deal, Sisters of Scripture, and Rise Up and Pray. Those books are on Amazon. They're available on Amazon.
Oh, okay. So,
And Rise Up, no, The Real Deal and Sisters of Scripture are also available on JetsonPress.com. J as in Judy, UD as in David, SON Press.com. Judson Press. But all three of those can be obtained at Amazon. So for people who want to reach me, they can email me. That's the quickest, fastest way. And my
mhm.
email is my name, Billie Cook 130 at gmail.com. Billie Cook, or BILLIECOOK 130 at gmail.com.
Well, thank you so much. And I want to make one other point. Your book, Sisters in Scripture, the
Mhm.
pictures. We talked about the black face that was on The Real Deal, but
Right,
the pictures of the sisters on here are all different races.
right, right.
And well, of course it's intentional, but that tells you a whole lot about what you're about to read. You're trying to reach everybody.
Right.
Yeah.
So again, tradition. Now remember, that's traditionally published. So I had no idea of what the cover was going to look like until
Yeah,
I
I
actually got.
didn't realize that until I was talking to. We had a show with another author, and how once the book is published like that, unless you self-publish, I don't know, maybe you have more control over but in most cases they choose a really good cover, and
Mhm.
this other particular artist had no idea until she received. Well, they sent it to you first and for your
Exactly.
approval,
Yeah.
and when she got it, she said she never would have thought of that, but very effective. They know how to because sometimes people buy books, they see the cover,
Just
and that draws them in first.
exactly.
You know,
Exactly.
so
Exactly.
and the last thing I'll let you go then. What advice would you give to you have people that go to school for writing and major in it, but you have other people that don't necessarily, that's not their major, their direction as far as their career might be going somewhere else, but they still have that creativity. And because you see now lawyers and everything become authors and everything, even in their field, they're doing what they do, but they have that creativity inside of them, just like you, and they have to put it down, put
Correct.
the pen to paper. So what advice would you give to those people that might be in school now or not in school now, but have those creative juices flowing in them? you know how would they start? What would the first thing they should do if they want to become a published author?
The first thing I would tell them, first advice I give when I do writers workshops is keep writing.
Mm-hmm.
Keep writing. Because 9 times out of 10, your first draft is exactly that. Your very first draft.
Mm-hmm.
Get your feelings hurt when even you realize you got to, no, you got to rewrite, rewrite, rewrite. So keep writing. The second thing I would advise people to do is to take advantage of writers' conferences. In our area, the Muse Writing Center over in Norfolk. In fact, I take classes over there myself. But the Muse Writing Center over in Norfolk, they have sponsor various kinds of writing classes. You can take a creative writing class from TCC, but the big deal is to keep at it and understand that it is a process. It is a process. Go to writers' conferences, take a couple of writing classes, even if you do it online, but keep writing and keep working on it. Because 9 times out of 10, if you're going to work with a traditional publisher, they will take it and they will take it all apart. Tell
Mm-hmm.
write this, rewrite that.
Yeah.
A lot of people want to do self-publishing. There's nothing wrong with that. But when you go to self-publishing, you have to understand that you make all major decisions and you must do the marketing and the promoting of the book. And I found that's where a lot of self-published authors they don't bargain for that. They just thought, I get the book out there, say it's on Amazon, then boom, it'll sell. It'll sell.
Yeah,
If you
and it's hard to make the bestseller list like you did.
it
And
is
if you self-publish, I guess it happens, but it's probably rare. It's already takes a lot of effort to
you do
put your thoughts down on paper and then just turn it over to the professionals, and everything has to be finally approved by you.
right.
But like you said, all those things that you suggested to do, once you get to the publisher, then it might not be chopped up as much as
Right.
it normally would if you didn't
Uh,
prepare yourself.
right. You will understand. So yeah,
Right.
writings, not to give them a plug, but Hampton Roads Writers is having their writers conference in next weekend? Yeah. I think it's not this weekend, but next weekend.
Mhm.
And when you go to writers' conferences, that's when you can meet agents, you can meet publishers, you get a sense,
Editors.
right, what people are looking for, if it's the area that you're writing in, or what some possibilities of titles are and stuff like that. So yeah,
So
you gotta,
just get that initial direction.
you got to expose
Mhm.
yourself. Keep writing. Check out the writers' conferences and um, explore the industry. Really try to educate yourself about the publishing industry because it's changed a lot.
Hmm.
Now we have ebooks. When the real deal first came out, there was no such thing as an ebook. Now,
Right.
ebooks. And the real deal and Sisters of Scripture, Judson has them as an ebook as well as paperback. So all of that, explore the industry and open yourself up to that.
Well, that sounds good. And Billy, I thank you for coming on. I appreciate you. And we must do this again. It's always a lot we can talk about
That's
beyond the writing of books, because like I said earlier, you've been involved since you've been back home, and you've been back home for a while now, but you get involved in a lot of things in the community. And so it's a lot of things we can talk about as well about what's going on in our great city
that's true.
and country and throughout the country. Yeah. Can't leave that out because things that happen nationally usually trickle down and affect us here in our fair city. But thanks again. I really appreciate you and take care. We'll see you next time.
So much for the invitation. I really, really appreciate it.
I enjoyed it. And thanks everybody for watching the Slim Nation One-on-Ones podcast. And we'll see you next time with another special guest. Take care.